You're watching Double Standards with me, Afshin Rattansi. You're watching this channel because you don't like mainstream news. You don't like them drumming up American-backed wars. Well, sadly, some revolutionary television channels end up copying the West and just turn mainstream. This week, the P5+1 nuclear talks with Iran and a certain Qatari Arabic TV station. Coming up in the show, the war of information and media over Syria as rival observatories fight it out. Why is this man begging for bullets and mobile phones? Could it be anything to do with Obama's $100 million handout? And we have an exclusive extended interview with Jihad Balout, the former manager of media relations at Al Jazeera Arabic, about why the station has gone so wrong. Let's go straight to the talks where representatives from the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China have convened to discuss Iran's nuclear program. Top of the agenda will be results from investigations made by researchers from the IAEA, or International Atomic Energy Agency.
What is that gadget?
This is an iPhone.
iPhone?
Uh-huh.
Hello? Hello? There's nobody there. Don't forget to dot the I's.
He's got a headache.
No, I don't.
How about now?
Yeah, it's coming on.
Actually, more seriously, nuclear scientists have fallen to their deaths from UN buildings in suspicious circumstances. There was the death of British nuclear scientist Timothy Hampton. He was a specialist in weapons of mass destruction and died in a building close to talks that were held to discuss Iran's nuclear program back in 2009. By strange coincidence, his partner, Olena Grischuk, was a weapons inspector at the IAEA. Hampton had previously worked with UK weapons of mass destruction expert David Kelly, who was also found dead in suspicious circumstances. And that's not all. There have been more suspicious suicides at UN nuclear agency offices in Vienna. Under a year ago, an American died at the IAEA in strikingly similar circumstances, his body being found at the bottom of a stairwell. And look at this, reported after the death of Hampton. According to UN staff members, 4 months ago, an employee who is also believed to be British lost his life in a similar case when plunging down from a comparable height. Perhaps these are all just conspiracy theories. Let's look at facts. Who is stirring up the most rhetoric about Iran at the P5+1 talks? You guessed it, the USA. So let's compare American and Iranian warlike tendencies.
Estimated number of nuclear weapons owned, Iran nil, USA 8,500. Number of nuclear weapons used on civilians, Iran nil, USA 2. Estimated military expenditure in 2010, Iran 7 billion, USA $687 billion. Countries attacked since 1980, Iran nil, USA too many to mention.
So maybe the P5+1 should be discussing sanctions on America instead of on Iran. Anyway, the confirmation of the location of the talks in Istanbul coincidentally came on the same day that a US journalist revealed to the world that the US has been training terrorists near Las Vegas in America to infiltrate Iranian society and carry out acts of terrorism. We'll have more on that next week. No doubt Syria, as well as nuclear weapons, will be a subject for debate, what with America defying Russia and China and Iran over intervention against President Assad. First, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton pledged U.S. taxpayer money to organizations like the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights.
To train Syrian citizens to document atrocities and abuses and to identify perpetrators.
Only problem is that there are two Syrian observatories for human rights, and they are fighting Bashar al-Assad and each other.
The Syrian Observatory of Human Rights.
It's one of the most widely quoted sources of Syrian casualty figures, but it's not always telling the truth. An ownership row at the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights has left several media outlets quoting false information as two rivals fight for the same name. The original group was hijacked by opposition activists for posting military deaths alongside civilian ones. Both sites claim they're the official observatory. This, though, is the original site in Arabic with an English version on Facebook. And this is the fake site, launched in December and mostly in English.
Well, once that war is over between the two websites, perhaps Hillary Clinton will figure out who to pay. What else will the American taxpayer be shelling out for?
And more than $12 million in new humanitarian aid, bringing our total to nearly $25 million. Is you do not and cannot discriminate against religious minorities, women, political opponents. There has to be a process starting in an election that lays down certain principles that will be followed by whoever wins the election.
Well said, Mrs. Clinton. No discrimination against religious minorities, women, or political opponents. So where did she fly to? This place, where there is discrimination against religious minorities, discrimination against women, and discrimination against political opponents. You guessed it, she was in Saudi Arabia to sell and proliferate weapons in the heart of the Middle East. Can you believe she was talking about human rights and hours later cozying up to Saudi Arabia? It was Saudi Arabia that accidentally catalyzed a new TV channel in the 1990s. When it banned BBC Arabic from the kingdom, the Qatari government bought off all the journalists to create a brand new channel, Al Jazeera Arabic. And everyone in the developing world may remember what a revolution it was to see Al Jazeera in the 1990s. These days it is getting some criticism, and some say Al Jazeera Arabic is getting out of hand. What exactly is going on here? I can feel the pain of the anchor as he tries to mediate between his two guests. They appear to be about to kill each other. We're not sure what happens after this, or indeed whether any of them are now alive. That was quite a discussion. This week we have an extended interview with Jihad Balout, who was the public face of Al Jazeera Arabic when it began, and when it was being bombed by the United States, and when it was a vital media player against mainstream news. In a Double Standards exclusive, we spoke to this former strategic manager at the channel about its past, present and future in the context of the so-called Arab Spring. With me is Jihad Balout, the former face to the outside world for the Al Jazeera network owned by Qatar's government, but he's also worked at the BBC and Al Arabiya. Jihad, welcome to Double Standards. Let's start with your career, in a way, at Al Jazeera when it began and was such a revolutionary television station. It must have been revolutionary because the Americans were bombing their bureaus. Tell me a little bit at the beginnings of the channel.
Well, apart from actually the Americans bombing and a few Arab countries actually despising Al Jazeera at the time, Al Jazeera in itself has created what I would consider actually a revolution in Arab media. And this has, irrespective of what's happening now, this has to be actually, it is something that is very good for Al Jazeera and very good for the people who followed Al Jazeera.
And I should declare an interest. I worked at the Arabic side too, although I definitely applied for a job from you, I'm sure, at some point at the beginning. Of course, now the talk about Al Jazeera is very different around the Arab world. They're not so much getting banned by Arab governments, they're being applauded by some Arab governments. Tell me when you think change occurred in policy at Al Jazeera, because it's now under a lot of fire for its coverage specifically of Syria and other countries in the Arab world.
Actually, with the advent of what's considered to be the Arab Spring, Al Jazeera has gone through a great change from the flag bearer of objective journalism to what many people and many observers consider to be a policy or foreign politics-led news organization. At a time when Al Jazeera has actually changed all this. When Al Jazeera started, it started as a project of pure professional journalism, and actually it gave the people what they wanted to give, what they wanted to hear. But as we see now, which is a real shame, because everybody at that time when Al Jazeera started wanted to be part of this ongoing professional project for all purposes, on a social level, on a cultural level, and on a professional level. But now it's a pity that it's been attacked, and to a certain extent rightly so.
We should say there are a lot of good journalists, I believe, who are working for Al Jazeera Arabic, and Al Jazeera English and Al Jazeera Arabic are slightly different. Why have they changed, according to you? Because it's quite a thing for you, who knew Al Jazeera so well, to say what you just said.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't like to speculate too much. I'm like every other observer on the sidelines, trying to look in and trying to understand what's been going on. But it seems to me that Al Jazeera has lost its feel for what the Arab public wants to hear. Definitely, there is a wave of change in the Arab world, and this should be applauded and supported. But a news organization has to be professional, and to me and to various other observers, I think Al Jazeera erred while trying to handle and approach these popular intifadas or uprisings or revolutions or the Arab Spring, whatever you want to call it. I think initially, especially when it came to Egypt, I think no two observers would argue over the fact that Al Jazeera did a very, very good job. But suddenly things changed, especially when it came to Libya and Bahrain and Syria. And it seems to me that there are other considerations that the decision makers at Al Jazeera are taking, which I think is detracting from its professional stance.
Well, there were high-profile resignations, dismissals. We don't know, of course, whether Kanfar left. Some people were saying, oh, this is because he was friends with the CIA. These kinds of rumors. At the same time, personnel changes at the top. Just describe, from your vantage point as a media analyst now, how you saw these changes occurring at Al Jazeera.
Changes at Al Jazeera did not happen suddenly. It was a subtle movement, and I think the breaking point or the watershed was after the fall of Baghdad in 2003. I think after that, subtle changes were taking place, and since that date, you see a lot of well-known names actually either left or were pushed over. But it actually came very, very obviously only recently. Now, again, I don't want to speculate. I have a lot of respect for everybody that I've worked with at Al Jazeera, and I had a very high regard for them. They are really highly professional. But you and I know how it is when you're working under political pressure, and let alone the deadlines. Again, I mean, I don't want to speculate on what Waddah Khanfar was he asked to leave, or did he leave, or was it the CIA issue of the WikiLeaks and whatever. Suffice it to say, you're absolutely right. There has been what is akin to a hemorrhage within Al Jazeera, and I only heard this morning that there is a group of people that perhaps are seriously thinking about either putting themselves on the side or actually want to leave altogether.
Well, I know about political pressure from the BBC, actually, most. That's where I felt it most. We are really talking about government power, just as governments hold the BBC to account at times of war. How do you see Qatari foreign policy having changed all of this?
Again, the BBC maintained throughout whatever happens in the UK, it maintained a measure of credibility.
Obviously, the BBC got it completely wrong over Iraq, and in a sense, all stations reflect their owners or funding. How have you found it different, especially in the context of the Arab Spring? Because Al Arabiya as well, where you worked, many people in the Arab world seeing it as completely on the side of the rebels, say in Syria.
Well, this is strange. Al Arabiya being the organ of a very conservative regime, i.e. Saudi Arabia, is on the side of the rebels. I think there is a funny thing there. But Al Arabiya has never changed. It has always pursued this kind of editorial policy. So really, it's not making too many waves as such, because the audiences are not disappointed. I mean, this is the way Al Arabiya has been ever since its launch back in 2003.
So why have the Qatari royal family changed their view?
Well, I think you have to ask a member of the Qatari royal family about that.
They don't come on the show for some reason.
But my impression is, I think Al Jazeera has reached a stage where it has become, according to some Qataris, or decision makers, a potential weapon to use in furthering Qatari foreign policy. And this is the mistake. I think they have been, as I said, the watershed was 2003 and the fall of Iraq, and then things subtly began to change, and people on the inside who are involved in the decision-making process sensed that. And it was manifested by, as I explained before, by people actually leaving Al Jazeera, senior people at that, and faces that were considered to be part and parcel of the Jazeera phenomenon. But I think there is a political expediency that dictated on the Qataris to ultimately use this media channel to the detriment, I think, of the Arab media in general.
How ironic that when they try to wield the soft power, they kind of lose it, because it seems that stations like Russia Today and other stations, I would say, of course, Press TV, this channel, are spreading across the Arab world to give a different viewpoint on, say, what's happening in Syria, what was happening in Libya during the revolution there, and what's, of course, happening in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain.
I think it's logical. When you find the main Arab news broadcasters on one side putting the spotlight on certain issues to the absence of anything else, then audiences naturally will start looking for other alternative sources of news. I'm not saying that they stopped watching, but I think there is an element of credibility that has started to go amiss when it comes to these main Arab broadcasters. And they remain to be main and mainstream. I mean, let's not have any qualms about that. But then audiences started looking somewhere else. Thus comes Press TV, Al-An in Arabic, Russia Today in both English and Arabic. I mean, I'm surprised at the ways at which Press TV, Russia Today actually moved into the audience's houses.
I mean, if one's speaking for a moment, from the perspective of the leadership of a country, you're kind of saying the soft power isn't as powerful as it could be, because as soon as you try and wield it for your own geopolitical reasons, you lose viewers.
Well, I think this comes in the context of talking politics. But really what I want to stress about here is the loss of Al Jazeera as a viable and long-standing Arab media that was at a certain stage a credible source of information for all parts of the Arab world, as well as the Western world. I mean, it was perhaps watched by the West at certain junctures in the contemporary history as much as anything else, as much as CNN, for example. So this is the real shame about it all. I mean, soft power, sort of. I'm not very sure that I would put this in this context. I think in media terms, it is a loss not only for Al Jazeera. I think what's happening in Arab media now, exemplified by Al Jazeera, is a loss for Arab audiences at large.
Because it wasn't just Al Jazeera Arabic that are playing into this kind of geopolitical game. Libya, did it surprise you, the coverage? I mean, here on the Sky channel we had here, of course, the United States broadcasters, CBS, NBC, all cheering on, basically being part of the rebels, and then decamping immediately Gaddafi was killed.
I mean, it didn't surprise me as such. I mean, we all saw and lived the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. And we had, if not first-hand experience, we had an inkling of how the Western media, when its interests are at stake, how they would behave. I mean, I have it on very good authority that even some Arab media went out and paid money and sent experts to Libya to start transmitters and radio and television transmitters from inside Libya. But the problem is for the people who got entangled, and I say entangled because I think it's a minefield, and where they got their media entangled into the issue of Libya. I think they became so confident that they thought that they could actually rule the world, that that wealth can actually ruin lives and run and ruin lives. The Libya was so easy to do. and it was thought that perhaps it could be done in Syria. And I think this is where the problem lies, specifically where the problem lies, because Syria is very different to Libya, is very different to Egypt, in all manners of speaking. And I believe, from my analysis of the past week or so, I think there is a change in the official Arab public perception. I mean official, because Arab populations are very different. But the official Arab perspective vis-à-vis Syria, and I think we're seeing its manifestations now as we speak.
Central to all Arab broadcasting was always the Palestinian question. Do you think that's what's slightly influencing this Syrian question? Because surely it surprised you, as someone who's worked in this for this long, that broadcasters would so quickly oppose a government in Syria that has supported the Palestinians for that many years.
It surprised me, yes, to be honest, because I felt that whatever happens, as you correctly mentioned, Palestine would be at the center of attention, and it remains at the center of the attention of the Arab populace at large, irrespective of their political inclinations. But I felt that the media would pay its due attention. A case in point would be the latest bombing by Israel of Gaza. I mean, hardly any news whatsoever. If at all, it was third and fourth news item, which shocked me, yes, it surprised me perhaps, and it made me even sadder at the state that we are in.
I think that's why Hillary Clinton watches these programs, because that was quite an outburst from her during the Libyan conflict, I think it was, when she said, these other stations are doing so much better than Voice of America and US network channels.
Well, I mean, I remember an official, an American official back in 2001, 2002, saying that Al Jazeera is a beacon of light in an otherwise dark Middle East, or worse, I'm paraphrasing, or worse to this effect. And only a few months afterwards, Al Jazeera was the purveyor of terrorist information throughout the world.
And your co-workers were killed.
I mean, Al Jazeera at the time perhaps paid the ultimate price several times, and our offices were bombed at the time both in Pakistan and Baghdad, and I think we lost our dear colleague. Yes, of course, but I mean, this shows you how politics tries to put its full print on media.
Well, I did detect some hope when you said you can maybe see a change in the Syrian coverage. How far do you think this change that we've been describing over the course of this interview actually is going to change again now? And because they're losing so many viewers, they're so out of touch with the so-called Arab street.
Well, I don't think that, honestly, Al Jazeera in all would be able to roll back.
They have a lot of money.
I don't think Al Jazeera would roll back the style of its coverage without losing further credibility. And this is the conundrum that Al Jazeera is really trying to tackle. This is the problem. They've already lost certain measure of credibility by its coverage of the Syrian event and the coverage of lack of it of the Bahraini, what's happening in Bahrain. So to actually turn back, it's going to lose even further credibility.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, Jihad Balout. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hope you enjoyed that somewhat exclusive insight into the transformation of Arabic broadcasting, once so revolutionary, now so Western. There was more from Jihad Balout, and you can see the full interview in which we also discuss Western media on Press TV's website. Well, that's it for this week. You can email us at comment@doublestandardstv.com. It's 10 years since the US-backed attempted coup against Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. So who better to give his take on American broadcasting than President Chavez himself? See you next week.
¿Tú de dónde eres?
Where do you come from?
I work for Fox News.
Para Fox News, presidente. Fox.
Fox News. Me río de Fox News.
I love when I see people from
¿Sabe cómo lo llamó Sean Penn? Sean Penn.
How Sean Penn
Sean Penn dijo los estúpidos de Fox News.
The stupid people from Fox News. That's the way they call you.
No tú.
Not you, of course, not you. Of course not. Fox News.
Tu pregunta, tu elaboración es artificiosa.
Is artificious.
Tu mente tiene ahí
Your
confusiones.
Mind has many confusions.